Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3, 96.3 HD2, and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Vermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher. This is the Insight segment. A mother facing charges for shooting her own daughter. Countdown to the November election with candidates stumping for votes and trying to stay clear of controversy. What's the deal with Janet Jackson questioning Kamala Harris's race, and why are so many businesses boarded up in the DMV? And Angela also Brooks and property taxes. Big story, little story. We're going to tackle those stories and more tonight as we sit at the Reporters Roundtable, and we have a packed house. Our guests are Micha Green, managing editor for the Washington Informer, Keith Alexander, D.C. crime and courts reporter for the Washington Post, and James Wright for the Washington Informer. Ladies and gentlemen, as usual, thanks for being with us and sharing your expertise tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Let's start with the story of the Senate race in Maryland and the Democratic candidate Angela Also Brooks, county executive for Prince George's, property tax issues for Executive Also Brooks. Is this a big deal or a non-story as we head into the final weeks of the Maryland Senate race? And again, for those who don't know about it, she says, County Exec Also Brooks says that she was unaware of property tax issues that she needs to owe and is moving back to repay those monies owed to D.C. and Prince George's County, where she owns property in both of those jurisdictions. Republican challenger Larry Hogan, he slammed Also Brooks, saying she should know better, even though he somewhat had similar issues in the past. So I'll start with you, Micha. Is this a big deal, little deal, any deal at all? What do you think?
If I were former Governor Hogan, certainly I'd be making a big deal out of it, simply to cause a little drama, as the numbers are showing that Angela Also Brooks is leading. It's a close margin, but that she's leading in this Senate race. And so as the opponent, of course, you're going to latch on to anything that might make your opponent look like the not ideal candidate. But let's be real. As you said, Vermonte, Governor Hogan, former Governor Hogan, went through the same thing a few years ago. There are a lot of different nuances when you are taking over for family members at homes and things like that, that certainly we would love our leaders to be knowledgeable about, but we're talking different jurisdictions and family members who had certain protections that she might not have necessarily been able to tap into, that she might not have known what was happening. It's clear that the current county executive is working to right the wrongs, and her team has said that she really had no idea about it. I think that when you're in a heated race like this, everything looks like there could be a problem or drama, but I don't think this is the hill that former Governor Hogan should die on, particularly because he got in his own problems a few years ago with the same issue.
Keith, what are your thoughts here? I mean, when the race like this is close and polls are showing that Also Brooks is leading, little things can sometimes, tilt the race the other way or even it up. I don't think any of us would probably say Hogan probably shouldn't say anything about it. But what's your sense on the importance of the issue?
Well, this story has been the number one read story on the Washington Post website for the past 2 days.
Uh-oh.
So that tells you a little bit, right? That readers are very interested in what's going on here. This is a big deal, but it's not a huge deal. I mean, obviously, Also Brooks is saying that I'm going to write a check, take care of it, didn't know about it. And let's face it, not too many of us do our own taxes. We hire someone to do our taxes, and we trust them to get the best deal for us. And I'm sure that's what happened here. It happened to Eleanor Holmes Norton, as we all can remember. It happened to Hogan's predecessor, the previous governor of Maryland before Hogan.
O'Malley,
this is not unusual. And so the fact that, even Also Brooks saying, I didn't know about it, that's okay. I'll take care of it and we'll move forward. So just see how quickly this is taken care of. But yes, I mean, according to readers, this is a very interesting. This is something that has grabbed a lot of interest among our readers.
I think it's probably, and you jump in here, James, and tell me if you think otherwise. I think it's probably like any kind of issue, since we all pay taxes. And as Keith said, sometimes we do our own, sometimes we have others do it. So it's not really a complicated issue in terms of everybody has to pay property tax. Where I think, James, it gets a little interesting is if you really dig into the details, and Alsobrooks' campaign has said this, she really kind of lost money, because if she had taken a credit on the home that she actually should have taken credit on, she would have gotten more of a credit than what she did. So I think in some ways, if folks really read into that, that would cut her a break. But folks are mostly read headlines, even though I know Keith said folks are reading his stories of his paper. So what's your sense of this?
Well, let me clarify. Folks are clicking on
clicking. That's true.
I don't know how far down the read.
That's fine. I got you. Yeah, good point. What's your sense of this story, James? Does it have legs? Will it, or does it kind of just peter out at some point?
It has legs, Bramante, but very, very little legs. And let me tell you why, because a lot of people have problems with property taxes. As Micha kind of alluded to, you're dealing with two different jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions have rules and laws that are different. You have a tax credit in the district that you don't necessarily have in Maryland. And also, as Micha also alluded to, you're dealing with a relative. One relative is leaving the property where they would get the tax credit, as opposed to she taking over, whether she gets that or not. In other words, that is just such a confusing thing when you're dealing with property taxes, especially multiple jurisdictions. But like I said, this is a very small story. I think this will fizzle away in 2 weeks.
And we should sort of also clarify that the property in DC was her grandmother's property, I believe, right? And then she took over the mortgage, but her grandmother was still taking a tax credit for senior citizens, and also another credit that Alsobrooks. So in that sense, I think it's understandable. Before we leave this story,
and then she sold the house.
Then she sold the house. That is correct, right? That's right. What's our sense, Keith, or what's your sense of the race right now? Outside of this issue, you're surprised that Alsobrooks is holding a lead. How should we read into the polls? I think some polls say she has about a 5 percentage point lead. What's your sense of that?
Not so surprising in the state of Maryland. It's very much of a Democratic state, and so that's so surprising that she would hold or have such a strong lead. But it's so early. There are parts of Maryland where Hogan does definitely carry some weight. I will be surprised if Alsobrooks' lead dwindles over the next few weeks. I think right now what we're seeing or we're hearing is that she is running a strong race. Again, because you're in a state that is dominated by the Democratic Party. So we're going to see what happens. But right now she's strong ahead, and I think that's what I'm hearing. It's going to remain so moving forward.
Well, James, though, the thing is, Larry Hogan was a popular Republican governor 2-term in a very blue state, right? He's got I don't even know if we can say he's got the support of the RNC, because I think, when he came out and didn't support Hogan, they said, well, that's the end of your campaign. What's your sense of this? And then we'll move on of this race. Do you agree with Keith that you'd be surprised if Alsobrooks doesn't come through? I must say, I'm asking the question, but I'm about to give my opinion. I'm a little surprised that she holds a 5-point lead, because I've worked down on the Eastern Shore. I kind of know what that area is like. I know you got to win, Montgomery County, PG County, and Baltimore. You can win the race. But anyway, your thoughts?
Well, 2 quick things. Number one, keep in mind that when Larry Hogan ran for governor in 2014 and for re-election in 2018, he was essentially running against weak Democrats. You had Anthony Brown, who was the lieutenant governor in 2014. Anthony wasn't as well known by any measure, and he didn't come across very well in 2014. So Hogan had it there. And in 2018, you had my friend, the former, who's now with People for the American Way, Almost nobody knew.
Been
Yes,
jealous,
been
yeah.
jealous. Almost nobody in the political realm in Maryland knew who he was. So Larry Hogan really didn't face any like strong opposition in his races for governor. In terms of Angela Also Brooks, the two biggest jurisdictions, as you just said, Montgomery County and Prince George's County, are going to come out for her. I see her winning this thing by 5 points. Oh, and by the way, Brimante, keep in mind, Angela Also Brooks won Montgomery County in the primary.
Mm-hmm. True, good point.
Against was supposed to win that.
That's right. Yeah, very good point. Let's pivot.
I'm sorry, I just have to do this.
Jump in, Micha.
James is used to this because I am a senator. Ben Jealous is no longer a president of People for the American Way. Just have to fact check that for the people out there.
That's
I wouldn't be a good editor.
Managing editor. There she goes. That's right. Somebody's going to call us or call you. Yeah. Let's stay kind of in the county executive's county. This story on Monday, this mother allegedly who shot her 13-year-old daughter in the neck. Paramedics come. The mother says there's some intruder that came in, shot the daughter, told the daughter to tell the same story. More investigation finds out that the mother shot the young lady in the neck. Micha, you know, we've talked about these stories before. All of you have covered these kind of stories. So there's really not a great new twist to put on it. I can't even form a great question to it other than these kind of crimes that are happening, and especially inside the home. And maybe even in some ways there is a political bent to it. You know, the issue of crime in this Senate race. I know Hogan has brought that up in Prince George's County with Also Brooks. But maybe let's just talk about just the story in itself. What are your thoughts when you heard this story?
Well, it certainly is a tragic story. I am happy to see that this 13-year-old still has her life, but we're talking about, you know, a different conversation of crime than I think has been often considered in this Senate race. We're talking about mental health, domestic issues here. We have this mother who was, if we're doing the math right, still a teenager when she had this child. And now this dispute that started as a fight between the both of them, this teenager was leaving the house, and as she was leaving, her mother, the person who gave life to her, is now being charged for first-degree attempted murder. I mean, I think that here, when we're considering these facts, we have to really look at the whole picture here. Certainly, it's sad, but I think we have to interrogate some of these programs again that lead back to how can we protect the families? What are these programming opportunities in Prince George's County that our leaders are working toward to really ensure that families feel safe? I mean, this was a failure in the family unit here. And while it certainly is a crime and while we should be treating it as such, I think there's a lot to unpack here, more than just gun violence, which is certainly important.
Yeah, and then just to follow up on that, we had, I believe over the weekend in Mount Rainier, folks sitting in the parking lot in the car, and there was a deadly shooting there where someone came up and shot into an SUV, killing one victim, critically injuring another, two others actually in that. And Keith, you know, and then just recently out in Montgomery County in Germantown, again, this smash and grab of ATM machines where vans are just plowing through the front glass of these stores. I think the thing to me is, I don't know if I'm surprised that at some point these stores just don't get rid of ATM machines, because this story seems to just keep coming back, and you would think maybe it would subside with the coverage, the media coverage of it, but it seems to keep popping up here and there. Now it's happening in Germantown. Well,
it keeps popping up because businesses aren't being smart about where they're storing, keeping these ATM machines. I'm
and
surprised.
why keep them, Keith? Do you know, are they making that much of a profit in having them?
Well, they are making a profit. Everyone doesn't have a credit card. Everyone can't afford it. You can't get a credit card. So a lot of them, have a way to get access, and they have the ATM card. So I think people assume that everyone has credit cards out there, and everyone does not have a credit card. And I think what's interesting is that you're seeing a lot of businesses are now putting these ATM machines further back into the store, away from the wall that's closest to the outside. And that's what I'm saying. When I walk into a store and I see the ATM against the wall, then the wall on the other side of the wall is the outside. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense anymore. So most companies are now putting those ATMs on the far wall, where it's not adjacent to it and outside. And it's easy access these days, and robbers are easily knocking down windows, and literally dragging the entire ATM out.
And I tell you, James,
this is not a new story at all.
No, it's not. And I tell you, in the minute we have before we go to break, James, I got to be honest. I think twice of going into these convenience stores if I know there's an ATM. Now, maybe because I have a credit card and so I don't have to go into these convenience stores, but I would think from a business standpoint, and you're a business manager, that at some point you've got to think about, yes, this gives access to those who don't have credit cards, but what about the others who do, where you may lose their business if they're afraid to come into a store that they know an ATM is close by and somebody can smash and grab and smash you while you're in there?
This is really a terrible problem. It's one of these problems, Bramante, that nobody thought would ever come about. I mean, you don't do this. You just don't go smash and grab an ATM or take materials like that. People just coming into these stores and mass taking stuff and running out the door. We're dealing with a different culture and a different mindset. I like the idea of putting the ATM in the back, because at least you have to go to the back in terms of getting what you want and have to walk up front so the manager can see it up front. But what it calls for is that these stores are just going to have to invest more in security. Now, I'll tell you this: if they invest more in security, the prices of goods in there and the prices of things are going to go up.
All right, that's the manager talk.
But real quick,
hold that thought, Keith. Hold that thought. We'll get back to that. Let me take a quick break. We have to jump over to the other side. Don't forget, you can hear every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, or you can download the 96.3 HD2 app on your smartphone and hear the program live in its entirety. This conversation with our panel continues online and on Sirius XM channel 141, 96.3 HD2. The original Quiet Storm is next on 96.3 WHUR. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141, 96.3 HD2. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. This is the Reporters Roundtable. Keith, you wanted to follow up on James's point about prices probably going up.
Well, that's so much that, James had a very good point about investing in additional security, but I have seen entire walls taken out. So I don't know what kind of security you can invest in when literally a plate glass wall has been taken out so they can access. I mean, they drove a truck or something into the wall, put chains around the ATM and drug it off. So I'm not sure what kind of additional security would be needed. And a lot of these,
unless you do like the banks where you have a security person standing outside.
But this happens overnight.
Right.
This happens during working hours.
Right.
And so I don't think we'll have a guard at the CVS at 3:00 in the morning. So I think that's going to be the problem. You guys can figure out a different way of handling that.
And I just want to note, because we asked why are the ATMs still around, as somebody who is the young legs for the family and goes and plays folks' numbers. They're necessary because you can't play someone's numbers without cash. There are online options, of course, and I think that, there are certain machines where you can use a credit card or an ATM card, but in order to write out those numbers that family members might have or that you might have and give to the cashier, you have to have physical cash. It is the thing that I don't like doing in my week for family, but I do because I'm supported and thankful. and
Well,
and
Micha, I got some numbers I'm gonna give you, girl.
Look,
Now that I know she's running them,
look, Keith, I was
offline.
about to say the same thing. I was like, so Micha, so you're the numbers runner. Is that what you're telling us? I mean, we're going old school. That's you didn't want to give yourself that title.
We ain't gonna knock the hustle, girl. We ain't knocking the hustle.
You know, you got to be there for the family. I understand.
No, but you know, again, I would love for DC Lottery to make it so that you can use your card and we can just take the ATMs out of there. But it's a necessary factor in a lot of these places. In Mount Rainier, which is right over the DC line, this happened at a liquor store, which is often where people are going to play their numbers and things like that. So I want to throw it out there that's a little caveat that maybe the lottery needs to think of in preventing crime.
Good point. Good point. Let's shift now over back into politics and let's go national. So the countdown is on to the November election. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, they continue to hit the battleground states. In North Carolina, Republicans are running for the hills away from GOP gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson. And the fallout continues in that issue of Robinson, who reportedly made comments on a foreign website referring to himself as a black Nazi, supporting slavery, and a whole bunch of other issues there. So let's start there, James. What's your sense of where this race stands now, what we're seeing, what we're hearing?
Okay, and you're talking about in North Carolina where Mr. Robinson, who has some issues, and I mean,
in a strange neighborhood. Yeah,
in his neighborhood. He is really going to help Kamala Harris in North Carolina because the Republicans are not going to turn out for Mr. Robinson. And they may not even turn out for Mr. Trump in terms of Mr. Robinson. And when I talk about the Republicans, Vermonte, I'm talking really about the ones in the urban areas, such as the ones in Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, those type of areas. So that should help Vice President Harris. And I really think he should step down, but I'm not a Republican, so I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah.
Well,
missed that deadline. Yeah,
you know, he's hired an attorney, right? You know, this is just yesterday. His campaign hired an attorney to investigate what these allegations as to whether or not these are actually true. You know, he's bleeding staff. A lot of his staffers have left his campaign. You know,
but
it wasn't just the whole black Nazi thing. It was, you know, he criticized Martin Luther King Jr. You know, by calling him criticized Martin Luther King Jr. And also comparing and saying Adolf Hitler was better than some people in Washington. So this allegedly, and so now, you know, obviously what it haven't said is that Robinson has denied all of these allegations, which is why he has hired an attorney to investigate where these alleged comments appear or did not appear.
But Micha, they knew a lot of the comments, the Republican Party, that Robinson had made, you know, before some of this stuff had become public, and he was still nominated as their standard bearer in that state. So this can't really be a surprise to the GOP insiders, right? And then the people who voted for him to make him the nominee.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm going to take it there because nobody else has, but Mark Robinson's complexion makes a huge difference in how the GOP is operating in general around this. You know, we look at the Republican nominee for president who has 34 charges against him, and no one is running for the hills, running for the hills in the way they are for Mark Robinson. Now, let's just be clear. If these allegations are true, it is disgusting and actually in many ways contradicts the man that Mark Robinson has presented to be. He's been anti-trans rights and yet is saying that he's into trans porn. And there have been comments, you know, obviously I think not the most pro-Black leader that he, but not to the level in which he's been anti-MLK and calling himself a Black Nazi, things like that really contradict the public image that he's created for himself. And so in that case, I think these leaders should be doing so, distancing themselves. Some of the people who are running for the hills in many ways are also running their own races and just not trying to be a part of it. That said, it's only surprising to me because I can't believe those same actions didn't take place with the presidential candidate.
Keith Robinson was already running about 10 points behind the Democratic nominee. And I think a lot of the conversation now is, will this drag down, as James sort of alluded to, support for the top of the ticket, meaning Trump? He really is Teflon. To Micha's point, I don't remember anybody resigning from his campaign in 2016 when it came out and what he said on the bus about grabbing women by their private parts. So it seems like there is a whole different accountability for Trump and really any other candidate that's a Republican that says these crazy things, but especially one who's African American. So what's your sense of whether or not this will affect Trump?
It's interesting. A few weeks ago, Trump had a rally in North Carolina, and guess who wasn't there?
Robinson.
And Robinson was not there, and that's unusual, right? Because he has been at everything where Trump has been at, except lately. So now even Trump is distancing himself. So that answers your question right there.
Even though he is not with words, right, disavowed.
Correct.
Robinson.
He's no longer invited to the Trump party.
He won't be coming to Mar-a-Lago. But we did hear Trump, James, I think it was just yesterday, give a speech and said, for the women, I will be your protector. You don't have to worry. I will be there for you. And you won't have to, and I may be paraphrasing, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think he said, you won't have to talk about abortion. And there has been a lot of pushback on Trump wanting to be someone's protector. Now, we keep talking about the things he says, and we would think that would make him be a disqualifier. Most folks who've got 34 counts, who's been found guilty of sexual abuse and called rape by the judge in the case. And now he wants to be the protector of women. It would seem to me this is not going to help him with female voters. What says you? Am I wrong here because he's Teflon, or will it have an impact? You think those kinds of comments that he's going to be women's protectors?
Okay, I'm going to make it plain. All right. In 2016, Donald Trump won the majority of white women voters, and Hillary Clinton was the Democratic nominee. And there's a strong chance that he may get the bare majority of white women voters in this year. But that's not going to matter, Brevante, because Kamala Harris is going to have such an overwhelming support from Black women, overwhelming support from Latino women, and a good support from Asian women that it's not going to matter very much in terms of gender. But let me just say that it's really sad that white women continue to vote for this man when he obviously has made it clear his contempt for them and that he does not support policies that are for them moving forward in our society.
Micha, I'm going to come to you as our lady on the panel. Does it strike you any different than you think it may us, or what's your sense of what Trump had to say regarding that? Because I've seen reaction on both sides, with gender, and I was watching one female anchor today on the cable news, and she said she was insulted by what Trump had to say, that women, first of all, need a man to protect them.
Yes, Bramante, when you asked me the question, you might have seen me shake because there was
I did.
Of heebie-jeebies that one feels when you think of the former president even putting himself out there as a protector for women. His exact comment, I think, was that women won't even have to think about abortion, which I think is really concerning in so many ways, because it's not just that he's saying in whatever Trump's world is that this won't be a problem, but that this will not be something that women should occupy their thoughts about, because for whatever reason that is even too much, right, for women to have their own ability to think about such things and be concerned about such things. And so I agree with that anchor, whoever she was, who said that she was offended by the
I think
comment.
it was Micha Brzezinski on the
Okay,
MSNBC.
well, Micha, I call her my almost name twin, so I'm always Micha, I totally agree with that in that regard, and I think that, again, the way it'll be really interesting to see what white women do this year. I covered very closely the Women's March post the 2016 election. And there were so many women out there in their pink kitty hats, right? Saying that they were so offended by Donald Trump's policies and ways and actions and words. And yet, as James said, they solely, in so many ways were behind the reason that Donald Trump won the 2016 election. And so I'm hoping that at least these comments will allow voters in general to really say, Donald Trump doesn't want me to think about something. Maybe I need to take a step back and use my brain and figure out how to move forward in the ballots in a couple months.
Yeah, Ramon, if I can just add a real quick thing here that yesterday a poll came out that showed that Kamala Harris is the margins for women versus men. She's definitely leading with women versus men. And so that's why Trump is saying now what he is saying. He has lost a lot of his female support, and the polls are now showing that he has lost a lot of support among women, which is why he is now desperately trying to say things to reverse that trend.
I think the problem is what he's saying, right?
Well, I was just gonna say, and in so many cases, I'm sorry, that was the resident girl comment on the call. So sorry, but he's just digging that hole even deeper. Just stop.
Yes.
But we may be asking something that's just not possible. Let's pivot over to the vice president and where she is and what she's doing. I think she's got a sit-down interview coming up. It's either today or tomorrow. I can't remember. Are we still on that? And I want to get all of your opinions on this about, is she doing enough sort of sit-down interviews, or has that passed? And let me start there, James. Is she doing enough, in your opinion, right, or really laying out her plan of what she wants to do for the nation in the specifics? It's not a loaded question. I just kind of want to know, do you think she's doing enough with that? Because you kind of hear that bubbling up among undecided voters. I want to hear more about what she's going to do for me.
Yeah, I think she's doing enough. And I think it's one of these, with all due respect, Keith, one of these mainstream media things that are saying that, well, who is she and how does she feel and what's her opinion, et cetera, et cetera. I think she's doing what she needs to do in order to win. And she's doing it in a way, a methodical way, I may add, that will answer the questions that many people have about her views. But she's not throwing it at the American people. She's giving it to them bits and pieces so they can get a full sense of who she is. So I think I like what she's doing. And I like what she's doing. But let me say this again, with all due respect to my friend Keith, this is a mainstream media thing.
Because you're going to be up next.
I just worked there. I'm not the Washington Post. Go on. Go ahead, James. Go on. Don't stop talking now. Go on, James.
I think James is throwing it to you.
Oh, okay. Well, so are you throwing it to me? Okay, I'll have you take the baton. It's interesting. First of all, we talk about these undecided voters. I'm amazed that there are still undecided voters at this stage. Let's just start there. And so I think what I really think undecided voters are basically closeted Trump voters. I really do think that's what they're just calling themselves undecided. But here's the thing: is people seem to be not comfortable with Harris when it comes to the economy. They're saying that they trust Trump more so with the economy. I've even heard black men say this. And so what Harris has to do and should do, whether it's the Washington Post or the Washington Informer or CNN or MSC, but talk about her plans for the economy beyond what she wants to do for small businesses. She's made that very clear, but she needs to do a little bit more talking about her plans for the economy, because a lot of people just aren't clear as to how she wants to strengthen the economy. And that seems to be the question mark out there when it comes to her.
And I do think, Micha, that polls have showed she's cut in a little bit in terms of that lead of Trump on the economy. But to Keith's point, I think folks, because she still is really the unknown quantity, folks kind of know, what Trump did and whether your pocketbook felt a little bit better, when he was in office. But it would seem to me that there may be something to that in terms of the economy, where the vice president probably has to offer, those regular folks a little bit more in terms of, this is exactly what I'm going to do beyond, giving these sort of tax credits to homeowners and small businesses.
I mean, money is incredibly important in this world that we live in. And so we know that the economy is a leading topic and point of importance in this race. And so I do think that the vice president needs to be explicitly clear about her plans. That said, again, we're talking about a candidate who has really touted and been very open about some of her achievements thus far in strengthening the U.S. economy and helping people's pockets, whether it be surrounding Medicaid or the finances that people are spending with their diabetes medications and things like that. And so now it's not what have you done for me lately, but what do you plan to do? And so I think in these conversations, one, it's the job of the journalists to really reel that out of her and get to the bottom of the vice president's plan, because that is so incredibly important to the people. I do just have to say, though, these criticisms about the fact that Vice President Harris is not doing a lot of sit-down interviews is really interesting, because she's been such a transparent politician from the very beginning, in complete contrast, again, to the former president and Republican nominee who, as we know, we could barely step foot in the White House or near the White House grounds as reporters during from 2016 to early 2017 to early 2021. It was almost impossible to do so because there was no respect for the press in the way that I think that Vice President Harris and the Biden-Harris administration has shown over the past 4 years that it's truly a priority to them. The other thing I really just have to note in all of this is that we need to make sure that in us, I guess, calling out Vice President Harris in all that she's doing, that we're telling the whole story. And so, for example, we saw last week she sat down with the National Association of Black Journalists. And even myself, who was at the NABJ conference when President Trump was there, I was not in the room where it happened, but I was in the city where it happened at the time, is that there was so much missing a part of the conversation of why Vice President Harris did not accept the invitation, which is that she was at a former congressman, or I should say the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's funeral at the time. I did not realize that even as the reporter until last week when we were tuning in to her sit up close and sit
But
down.
to be fair, Micha, the funeral was one day. The conference was for 5 days. So, so
that's very true. That's very true. I'm still side-eyeing the whole situation. Don't make me.
But she is black, right? Because I'm going to pivot off of that, because you used the line, Micha, while
what
you were
have you
talking.
done for me lately?
I heard that, Keith. Did you hear that too? I was ready. I wanted you to stop right
I'm
there.
glad that y'all
I wanted you to
y'all
stop
did that.
there because I'm like, man, I got the segue, but you kept going.
And y'all see, I even have my Janet here today.
I see you got it.
I'm sorry, radio folks.
Janet Jackson has said, well, I mean, I don't know if she's black. I heard that she's not. I heard that she's Indian, and I also heard that her father is white. And I don't watch the news that much, but that's what I heard. Then one of her publicist spokesperson came out to try to clean it up. He ended up getting fired. They said, well, he doesn't speak for us. Then the story comes out that maybe there's some bad blood dating back to like 2004. Kamala Harris had made some comment when Michael Jackson was on trial for child molestation. And she said, well, children tend to recall things that have happened. And I guess alluding to that, they know what happened, and that might have been some bad blood with the Jackson family. So there has been a lot of pushback. D.L. Hughley on Janet Jackson. It was not nice. Yeah. Keith, what's your sense of this? Again, here's a celebrity jumping out there, and you say what about Janet Jackson and her comments?
I say there are a lot of black men walking around scratching their head and wearing black and mourning. Like, what's going on with our girl? But here's the thing, this is the issue when it comes to celebrities talking about politics. And let's be real. I mean, this is, I'm surprised that Janet Jackson even commented. She commented for a reason. And Ramonte, you brought it up. There's history there, because most celebrities will shy away from commenting on politics because which is wise. You don't want to upset either side. But for her to respond and the way she responded shows that there's some history there. And Ramonte, you hit the nail on the head. There's a history regarding her brother. That's why she said what she said. That she wanted to throw a little shade on Harris based on what happened years ago.
And we're about to run out of time, and I wish I could give Micha and James a chance to comment on this. But I think the thing that I found interesting in her comments were two. One, she said, I heard her father was white. I mean, you could just look at a picture of the man, and he looks like me, James, and Keith mixed in there. So I don't know where she got that. And then when she said, I don't really know. I don't really watch the news. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What, you're saying a bunch of contradictory things that can't help support what you're saying. Yeah. And then again, folks, I don't want to lead them to another channel, but D.L. Hughley came in hard for her. All right, we're running out.
Just real quick. Her brother, Randy, is aligned, as we all know, with RFK Jr. And so Randy is doing a lot with her career now. And so that might also explain where some of that came from.
Yeah, I was just going to say this Randy RFK alliance, I think, is really where the drama, I mean, of course, we see the baby sister defending her big brother, but there's something else going there. And it's just irresponsible, Janet. You're about to have this great tour in Vegas. Focus on that. We have not asked Janet Jackson about her political leanings ever. 2024 is not the time to start.
And we're going to leave it right there. Micha Green is the managing editor for the Washington Informer. Keith Alexander, DC crime and courts reporter for Washington Post. And James Wright, business manager for Washington Informer. We thank you all. I love the conversation. Appreciate you all as usual. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, September 25th. I'm Bermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Have a great night.